and autism. Robert Pickton, pig-headed killer. Robert Willie Pickton was born 1949 on his family's pig farm in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. World with the umbilical cord wrapped around his throat. Deprived of precious oxygen while the midwife struggled to cut him free. His parents sometimes speculate that the trauma caused the learning disability. And possibly irreversible brain damage. He drove the family truck at the age of 3. You often hear crazy stories about autistic children getting into the craziest of situations or the craziest of scenarios because they don't have a strong sense of fear. And they are just generally curious of how things work. Pickton was left by himself in his dad's vintage Maple Leaf truck, Canadian General Motors classic from the 1940s. He excitedly jumped into the driver's seat and accidentally knocked the vehicle into neutral. The truck lurched forward and pigs went flying as it careened down the sloping terrain before the panicked young Pickton steered the truck right into a telephone pole. He was pulled from the wreck. His father beat the hell out of him. His dad apparently wasn't mad that he'd been playing around or even driving the truck. He was just mad that he'd crashed it. Pickton's mother and father had an unusual approach to raising children. Just 1 year after this incident, his mother caught him smoking a cigarette. And her way of curing this bad habit was to hand him a cigar. Yes, she gave a 4-year-old a cigar. She forced him to smoke himself sick. Admittedly, it worked. Pickton never wanted to smoke again. In particular, that locals would remember most clearly many years after the fact. She was decidedly unhygienic in her habits, with a mouthful of rotten teeth and a head that was almost completely bald, and a face with a fuzzy beard sprouting from its surface. Apparently not caring a whit how she looked, Louise would boldly trot out of the house in a dress and boots, screaming at the top of her lungs to Robert and his siblings, "Get over here now!" Robert was his mother's main target, and she was constantly berating him, ordering him around. His father, a Briton who had moved to Canada as a young man, was more distant in his parenting style, usually choosing to remain aloof. Life was hard on the Pickton's pig farm. The kids were constantly busy cleaning up after the animals, which included a handful of cows as well as 200 pigs. Pig farms, of course, are known for their odor. Pickton Farm apparently smelled pretty darn bad. The kids were routinely ridiculed for the aroma that followed them around. Among the local brats, the Pickton children were universally known as the Piggies. His siblings could admittedly imaginative moniker in stride and soon sloughed it off, but Robert, the childhood taunt, would continue to carry a sting for many years to come. Autistic kids are often bullied harder and they don't have the social skills to be able to schlep it off. They have a hard time discerning intentions of people and might not fully recognize when someone is berating them. In 1955, at the age of 6, Robert Pickton was enrolled in Millside, the local elementary school. Without any real training in manners or social interaction at home, the young Pickton was understandably awkward and shy around his classmates. Young autistic children often lack the social skills of their age-matched peers. Out of place from their cohorts. They have a hard time making friends due to their lack of social skills. Could have been magnified by inadequate parenting. His parents may also have been struggling with mental health issues, never fully diagnosed. When he finally did reach the 3rd grade, he was placed in the closest thing 1950s Canada had to a class of special needs students. He would remain in special education classes for the rest of his time in the school system. In 1963, when he was 13, Pickton matriculated at Mary Hill Secondary School, but he eventually dropped out due to the intense ridicule that he continued to face for his offensive odor and inadequate intellect. The playground bullies were constantly picking on Pickton, and the pressure drove him away from school for good. And just as society had rejected Pickton, it wouldn't be long before Pickton would thoroughly reject society.